So I've heard many men complain and say they hate when they hear women say my truth, right? But the truth is that all of us have our own truth. All that it means when a woman says my truth, and it's not only women that say it, because men that have high emotional intelligence also say my truth, but all that my truth means is my experience, my perceptions. And the majority, not the majority, no human being can take in all of objective reality. Our heads would just explode if we could take in everything, right? So our systems are designed for us to only pick up on certain aspects of reality. Therefore, that is your truth. Hey everyone, my name is Melissa Rochelle, and I'm a holistic wellness and relationship coach. So let's talk about how to be an irreplaceable man. Many men confuse what it takes to be a man of value in men's spaces with what it takes to be a man of value in a relationship with a woman. And they are two very different things. So it's kind of like you wouldn't take your work self to hang out with your friends, would you? It's the same reason why you should not take what it takes to be viewed as a man in men's spaces into your relationship with a woman. They are two very different things. Different spaces call for us to bring out different parts of ourselves. And there's this ridiculous idea that men learning new skills that their fathers or their grandfathers never learned is men being turned into women. It is not men being turned into women, it is men becoming more whole. And it is our journey for everyone, whether you're a man or a woman, to become more whole throughout your lifetime. So many men complain that women are not women anymore. They're not feminine anymore. So they view the feminine woman as being rare. So if you want to get a rare woman, then you have to become a rare man. I think it's toxic to keep telling men to just make more money because making more money is the way to get a woman. But hey, if your goal is to get a gold digger with a fresh BBL, then make more money or hit the gym might be the only tips and tools that you need. But if your goal is to actually find a nurturing, caretaking, feminine woman that you say is rare, then you're going to have to learn some rare skills that most men are too lazy to learn. I say too lazy to learn, not to be critical, but more so because I know how hard it is to learn to get in touch with your emotions. When I was in therapy, my therapist had this book that I would call her Big Book of Emotions. And I'd be sitting in her office, and there are many times where she would give me the book so I can learn to identify my feelings. So I know how hard and tough and grueling and exhausting it can be to learn to get in touch with your feelings. So I don't say men are too lazy to do it because it's an easy thing to do. I say they're too lazy to do it because it is something that can take years to learn how to do. So a while back, I was having a conversation with my husband about this idea that a man who isn't having his sexual needs met in his relationship, that it's okay for him to get them met outside of his relationship because men can separate sex from love. And I remember I asked him, I said, okay, I hear that, like he's trying to get a need met that isn't being met in his relationship. And some men don't see an issue with that. But here's the thing, I asked him, I said, okay, do you think most men are in touch with their emotions? And he was like, no. And I said, okay, so how about if his wife decides to go and get her emotional needs met outside of their relationship because they're not being met in his relationship? And my husband was like, no, that's different. And I'm like, how's it different? The man is getting his sexual needs met that are not being met in his relationship outside of his relationship. And the wife is getting her emotional needs met that aren't being outside of the relationship, that aren't being met inside of her relationship. So the exact same thing. And my husband was like, no, they're not the same thing because if she's getting her emotional needs met outside of the relationship, what comes next is sex because women start with emotion and then they have sex after. And I said, yeah, that's true. But in a man's case, sex comes first, then the emotional connection comes. So on both ends, for the man and the woman, they are both getting their emotional needs met and sex is just in reverse. So I don't see how they're very different. They're literally the exact same thing. Many men say that men are natural protectors and providers, but that's because they're only considering physical protection. But here's the thing. If you are not good at providing emotional support to your wife, then you are not a good protector. Why? Because emotional stress also leads to physical illnesses. So if you consider yourself to be a good protector, then you also have to provide good emotional support, because if she doesn't have a place to go to get that emotional support, her system is just going to register that, and that's going to lead to physical illness. So you're still not physically protecting her. So Since many modern women say that they do not need a man to provide for them financially, the way a man can become irreplaceable to her is by providing her with something that she cannot provide for herself, and that is emotional support. And becoming a great source of emotional support doesn't mean that the man is turning soft. It means that he values her softness. So, no, you don't have to learn to cry more often or take years to learn how to identify your emotions. Yes, you should do that work. Everyone should do that work. But you don't have to do that in order to learn how to be a good source of emotional support for her. And that is good news. So, here are 3 things a man can learn to become an irreplaceable source of emotional support for his girlfriend or his wife in his relationship. So I've heard many men complain and say they hate when they hear women say my truth, right? But the truth is that all of us have our own truth. All that it means when a woman says my truth, and it's not only women that say it, because men that have high emotional intelligence also say my truth, but all that my truth means is my experience, my perceptions. And the majority, not the majority, no human being can take in all of objective reality. Our heads would just explode if we could take in everything, right? So our systems are designed for us to only pick up on certain aspects of reality. Therefore, that is your truth. So here's an example. You know how when you learn a new word, all of a sudden you start to hear that word everywhere? So now that word is a part of your truth. It's a part of your experience. But does that mean that that word did not exist before you learned that word? No, that word in objective reality already existed before you learned it. But now that word has become a part of your reality, a part of your truth. So the first thing a man can do to become an irreplaceable source of emotional support in his relationship is to radically accept that we all have our own individual truths, okay? So that just means our own experiences, our own perceptions. And the second thing he can do is to learn how to validate her feelings. And there is a difference between validation and agreement. You do not have to agree with what she says to validate her feelings, to validate her experience. So here's an example of that. So validation simply means saying things like, it makes sense why you feel that way. I can see why you feel that way. I understand you. I hear you. I feel you. You are validating her experience and you're validating her feelings, but you're not saying, I agree with what you are saying. They are 2 very different things. You can disagree with what she says and still validate it at the same time. And the third thing he can do is recognize why a lot of men say women are never happy. So the way to do this is by recognizing the difference between a complaint and a criticism. So she can complain about some of your behaviors without criticizing your character as a person. And there are 2 different things, and you can do the same with her. You can complain about a behavior that she has without criticizing her character, her essential being as a human being. So, in one of his books, John Gottman, who is the top researcher in relationships, he can tell you with over 90% accuracy whether or not a couple is going to stay married or not, solely based on the way that they fight. Not whether or not they fight, but how they fight. So, this is why it's important to understand the difference between a complaint and a criticism. So, he words it like this. A complaint focuses on a specific problem, addressing the other person's behavior, not his or her perceived character flaws. Criticism, on the other hand, is more judgmental and global. It frequently includes such phrases as you always or you never. Criticism attacks the other person's character, often with negative labels or name calling. It often assigns blame. You said you would you said you would deliver the package and you didn't do it is a complaint. You forgot to deliver the package. That's irresponsible, is a criticism. Complaints can be difficult to say and hear at times, but they're generally worth the trouble because they help people to understand one another and to solve problems. Criticism, however, does just the opposite. It hurts people's feelings, leading to increased tension, resentment, and defensiveness in relationships. People don't communicate well when they feel defensive. They tend to shut out new information. They're not open to others' influence. All of this gets in the way of emotional connection. So one of the ways to keep the emotional bond strong in your relationship is to recognize the difference between when she is complaining about a behavior you have and when she is criticizing your character. And she should do the same, to recognize when you are complaining about a behavior she has versus when you are criticizing her character. And it's also important that when you are complaining about a behavior in your relationship, that you do not stockpile those complaints on top of each other. So here's an example of what I mean. Don't do this. I didn't want to say anything, but I can't take it anymore. You haven't asked for sex in over 6 months, and I feel like you don't love me anymore. Instead, word it like this. I like it when you make the first move, but it's been a while. Can we talk about it? Can you hear the difference? So the difference is that when you are talking about a complaint and you stick to the behavior and you are only talking about one behavior, that is an example of problem solving. And that is a leadership skill. And this is helpful not only in your relationship, but it's also helpful at work and in many different spaces. So you are showing leadership ability. You're trying to solve a problem. You're not simply just trying to lower somebody else's confidence or their self-esteem by criticizing their character. And I'll say one last thing here. When I watch a lot of content creators who are men and they're talking to men and teaching men how to be men, there's a couple of things that always stand out to me. Number one, they love to say that men are competitive by nature. So if men are competitive by nature and I'm taking advice from a man, why am I convinced that a man wants to teach me how to be better than him? Is he not in competition with me? That always stands out for me. And the other thing that always stands out is they will say that they're teaching men how to be leaders because men are supposed to be leaders of their relationships. They're supposed to be leaders of their household. But how exactly are you teaching a man to be a leader while constantly telling him how he has been victimized by women? So the same way a man will not follow a man or be under his leadership if he's constantly being victimized is the same way a woman will not follow the leadership of a man who's saying that he's constantly being victimized by women. So if you want to be viewed as a leader, you have to move like a leader, and that includes not being a martyr when it comes to your relationships. So again, here are the 3 things that a man can learn in order to be an irreplaceable source of emotional support in his relationship. Number 1, radically accept that we all have our individual truths. None of us are walking around taking in all of objective reality. It just doesn't exist whether you're a man or a woman. Number 2, learn the difference between validating her feelings or validating her experience and agreeing with her. You can validate her feelings by saying, I hear why you feel that way. I understand why you feel that way. It makes sense that you feel that way. That is validating the feeling and the experience, but that is not agreeing with what she's saying. Validation and agreement are 2 different things. And number 3, recognize the difference between when she is complaining and when she is criticizing you. A complaint talks about a behavior. So like they say a lot in couples therapy, the way to help couples is to let them recognize that they are on the same team, meaning the man is not the problem, the woman is not the problem is the problem. So a complaint focuses on the problem. And as a couple, we're going to tackle that problem together versus a criticism that goes at your character. It criticizes your character, who you are as a person, and it pokes at your flaws. So the third thing is recognize the difference between a complaint and a criticism. So if you found this information to be helpful, remember to like, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you.